Imagine a man who could collapse a market with a paragraph, but could walk through the streets of his hometown and not be recognized by half the people there. While generals pointed guns and politicians shouted into microphones, he held something far more dangerous in his hands: the value of every Nigerian's money. This is Clement Isong. On paper, he was an economist, a calm central banker, later a quiet civilian governor. In reality, he lived under a merciless countdown. History gave him barely a few short years to transform himself from a barefoot village boy into the man who would steer Nigeria's economy through war, oil shock, and political betrayal, while competing against louder, flashier rivals who wanted the same power he did, and were ready to do almost anything to get it. To understand how that happened, we need to go back to where nobody could have predicted it: a small corner of southeastern Nigeria in 1920. He is born on April 20th, in a world that already seems to have decided his place. The British Empire draws the lines on the map. Missionaries decide who learns to read. Traditional chiefs negotiate, argue, compromise. In the middle of all this, the baby named Clement Isong opens his eyes into a hot, humid morning, surrounded by red earth, palm, trees, and the muted rhythm of village life. In those early years, money barely exists as an object he can touch. Trade happens in baskets of gari and yams and fish brought from creeks at dawn. The idea that these same creeks belong to a region that will one day pump oil, that this boy will one day decide how that oil money is spent, that idea would have sounded like madness. The contrast is brutal. Outside, the empire moves with cold efficiency. Inside the village, life is fragile. A bad harvest can starve a family. Illness can take a child in a single night. For Clement, survival is not theoretical. It is something he sees in the shadows of his parents' faces when the rains are late. But there is something else in that village that will quietly turn into his weapon: the written word. The first time he sees a proper school, it's almost unreal. A simple building, wooden benches, chalk scraping against a blackboard. Yet in that room, the British curriculum and African ambition collide. Names of faraway places, London, New York, Harvard, float through the hot air like magic spells. For a boy born in the colonial backwaters, those names might as well be planets. The young Clement doesn't look like a future power broker. He is thin, serious, the kind of boy who listens more than he speaks. But under that quiet exterior, something hardens. A determination not to let other people's decisions trap his life in a 3-mile radius. He watches the district officers arrive in their cars, the priests in their clean robes, the local elites who understand the new world better than the farmers. He realizes very early that knowledge is not neutral. It is a weapon, and whoever controls it controls the future. There is another discovery too: numbers. While other children fidget through arithmetic, Clement enjoys the order, the logic, the idea that society's chaos can be reduced, even for a moment, into clear lines of calculation fascinates him. He sees that behind the colonial taxes, the trading prices, the imported goods in the market, there is an invisible network of numbers, deciding who eats and who starves. He wants to learn how that network works. That desire sends him on a path that very few from his background will ever walk. First, he fights for every chance to stay in school. Staying in school is not automatic. It means fees, books, time away from the farm. Every extra year is a small battle won against poverty, against expectation, against the comfortable idea that people like us do not go further. By the time he reaches more advanced studies, he has already started to confront a different kind of enemy. Not hunger, but comparison. In the college classroom, Clement is no longer the best by default. Around him are students from other regions, children of chiefs, traders, civil servants. The competition is suddenly real. Some of his classmates are more polished, more connected. Some have relatives in government, in business, in the church. If Clement wants to stand out, quiet brilliance will not be enough. He will have to outperform people who began the race well ahead of him. This is where his rivalry with a particular type of competitor begins, the kind of man who will haunt his career for decades. You know this figure, the gifted talker, the one who always knows the right person to greet, the right joke to tell, the right room to be seen in. While Clement pores over textbooks, this future rival is learning something completely different: how to read people, how to bend crowds, how to use charm like currency. In the classroom, Clement's world is equations, theories, charts. In the student common room, that other world is forming. The world of future politicians, men whose power will come not from balance sheets, but from the roar of a crowd at a campaign rally. One day, those two worlds will collide. One day, Clement's careful, disciplined economics will stand in direct opposition to the reckless promises and extravagant spending of those rivals. And Nigeria will have to choose. For now, though, the battle remains hidden, taking shape in the contrast between paths. As his academic results stack up, new doors open. He moves on to higher education, to the kind of training almost no one from his village could have imagined. University transforms him. On campus, he meets not just books, but ideas. Capitalist, socialist, nationalist. The arguments that are shaking the world after the Second World War. He studies economics formally, and his world suddenly expands. Inflation is no longer just prices going up. It is a force that can crush governments. Trade is not just ships in the harbor. It is power, bargaining, leverage. Currency is not just pieces of paper. It is the heartbeat of a nation. But something else is happening outside the classroom. Nigeria is waking up. In the streets, people whisper about self-rule. Newspapers test the limits of what they can print. Political associations mushroom. The colonial flag still flies, but its days are numbered. In faculty lounges, staff and students argue, what will an independent Nigerian economy look like? Who will run it? Who will make the decisions that London once made? Clement listens. Unlike some of his contemporaries, he is not drawn to the theater of politics, the rallies, the slogans, the grand speeches in town squares. His instinct pulls him towards something quieter but just as decisive. The machinery behind the scenes, the institutions, the rules, the central nervous system of a modern state. And so, when the opportunity comes to study abroad, he takes it. This is where the story could have gone in a very different direction. So many Africans who left for the West in those years never came back. They found comfort, safety, a life far away from the chaos of post-colonial transition. Clement goes to the United States, learns economics at a level very few of his countrymen could reach, eventually earning a PhD from Harvard, the very symbol of elite Western knowledge. He walks through snow in American winters, studies late under harsh fluorescent lights, debates theories drawn up by professors who have never set foot in Nigeria, never seen a village like the one where he was born. At Harvard, numbers are clean, models are neat, but he knows the reality back home is anything but. He faces a quiet, personal decision. Use this education to build a private career abroad, or carry it back to a country that is still not fully formed, still struggling, still dangerously unstable. This is the first real ticking clock in his life. Independence is approaching. The generation that will shape Nigeria's first decades of freedom is forming right now. Clement can either be part of that generation or watch from afar. The window's short, miss it, and the key positions will be taken, the institutions staffed, the directions chosen. He chooses to go back. When he returns to Nigeria, he does not enter politics directly. That would have been the flashy route, the route some of his more flamboyant contemporaries choose. Men who understood that the fastest path to power is through party meetings and campaign stages. Instead, Clement begins where he feels he can do the most honest work, teaching. At the University of Ibadan, he becomes a lecturer, then a respected academic. He trains the next wave of Nigerian economists, pushing them to see their country not just as a set of ethnic factions or colonial leftovers, but as an economic puzzle that can and must be solved. He talks to students who will later enter government, banking, civil service. He might have stayed there, comfortably, shaping minds in lecture halls and writing papers, but history has other plans. As the new Nigerian state tries to organize itself, it needs institutions that never existed under colonialism. One of the most important is the Central Bank of Nigeria. A country that wants to be truly independent must control its own money. That means its own central bank, its own policies, its own experts. Clement's reputation as one of the rare, genuinely world-class Nigerian economists has not gone unnoticed. He is invited into the orbit of the central bank, first in research and advisory roles. It is here that his two worlds finally meet. The abstract models from Harvard and the raw reality of Nigerian markets, ministries, and political expectations. Inside the bank's corridors, he discovers a new kind of pressure. Ministers want quick fixes. Politicians want money released before elections. Civil servants want salaries paid on time even when revenues fall. Every economic decision now has a face. The trader in the market, the civil servant at the end of the month, the foreign investors. Watching from London, New York, Paris, he learns to navigate this landscape carefully. Say no too often, and you make enemies. Say yes too easily, and you destroy the credibility of the institution you serve. Somewhere in this minefield, he must draw a line and defend it. Meanwhile, outside those calm offices, another storm is brewing. Regional tensions sharpen, disputes over census figures, allegations of rigged elections, struggles between North and South, East and West, minority and majority. Groups. Nigeria's young democracy starts to crack. The politicians who once smiled together as they lowered the colonial flag now quarrel bitterly. Coups are whispered about. The army, once in the background, quietly grows more confident. Clement, like many technocrats, tries to focus on his work, but he can read numbers, and the numbers are screaming danger. Budget deficits, rising expectations. mistrust between regions translating into economic sabotage. The tools he spent years perfecting, careful planning, disciplined budgeting, long-term thinking, are being squeezed by a political cycle that rewards short-term gain and theatrical gestures. And in that theater, he can already see his competitors shining. While he stays late in the office, checking data, calculating what the country can and cannot afford, other men stand on podiums, promising jobs, roads, water, electricity, everything to everyone. They are practicing the art that will later be turned against him. The art of making people believe that money, somehow, will always be found. As tensions rise, the countdown begins again. This time, not just for Clement, but for the whole country. Within a few years, Nigeria will plunge into one of the most devastating civil conflicts in African history. The economy will be weaponized. The currency will become a battlefield. And in the eye of that storm, one man will be asked to keep the financial heart of the nation beating. His name is already known in the right circles. His record at the central bank is solid. He is trusted by some, regarded with suspicion by others, precisely because he refuses to bend too easily. He is an academic among politicians, a rational calculator among emotional actors. In 1967, as Nigeria edges towards open war, the quiet boy from the village, the student who walked through snow at Harvard, the lecturer who tried to explain complex ideas to classrooms full of hopeful young Nigerians, is called to take on the role that will define his life. Clement Isong is appointed governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. The stakes could not be higher. The timing could not be worse. And somewhere, already sharpening their knives, are the rivals who believe they can ride this chaos to even greater personal power. Rivals who will one day stand directly against him, not in policy meetings, but in the brutal arena of electoral politics. The countdown to that confrontation has begun, and the man who understands numbers better than almost anyone else in his country is about to find out that some of the most dangerous calculations in life cannot be done on paper. Approximate length. This text is about 1,650 words, which corresponds to roughly 10,000, 11,000 characters, including spaces. They handed him the keys to Nigeria's vault at the exact moment the country was about to tear itself apart. One signature from his pen could fund an army or collapse a market. And the terrifying part? The man making those decisions still wasn't sure the generals in power actually trusted him to survive the year. 1967. The decree comes. Clement Isong is now governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. No victory parade, no cheering crowd, just a brief announcement, a few handshakes, and suddenly every note, every coin, every foreign reserve, every salary depends on his judgment. Outside his office, Nigeria is sliding toward full-scale civil war. Inside his office, the air is icy cold, not because of the air conditioner, but because of the numbers on the reports piling on his desk. He walks through the marble-floored corridors of the bank with a calm face, but in his head there is a clock ticking. How long before the first bank run? How long before panic on the street? How long before the generals ask him to do the one thing every serious central banker dreads? Print money like there is no tomorrow. His old rival type is everywhere now. The charismatic operator who knows how to whisper in a general's ear. While Clement is drawing up contingency plans, those men are already offering shortcuts. Sir, just release more cash. People need to be paid. Professor, no one will care about inflation if we lose the war. He understands their seduction. War turns every argument into now versus later, and later always loses. The country breaks. The eastern region secedes. The name Biafra appears on maps. Suddenly, the abstract theories he once debated in Harvard seminar rooms become brutal realities. Economic blockade, emergency budgets, wartime financing. The central bank that was supposed to guide development is now asked to help win a war. Clement looks at the map pinned on his wall. On one side, the federal government, with him as its central banker. On the other, a breakaway region printing its own currency, scraping for foreign support. Somewhere in between, millions of ordinary Nigerians who don't care about ideology. They just want food, safety, a future. Then comes one of the most brutal tasks of his life. Biafra needs money. It prints its own banknotes. The federal government responds with a cold, technocratic weapon. It announces a currency change. Old notes will be withdrawn. New notes will replace them. For millions of people, the paper in their hands is about to become worthless. Overnight. Behind that decision is a man who knows exactly what it means. Clement sits in a meeting room, files spread across the table, senior officials arguing. Some want a long transition period, to avoid public anger. Others want a short, sharp shock, to starve the secessionists of cash. The room is thick with politics, but at the center of it, there's also a technical problem you can measure in days and hours. How many weeks can the central bank's printing presses work nonstop? How fast can trucks carry the new notes to every town and village? How long before rumors start, before crowds storm bank branches demanding to change old notes that no longer exist. They turn to Clement. He does not shout. He never shouts. He speaks slowly, carefully, choosing words like a surgeon chooses instruments. He knows that whatever time frame he recommends will break someone's life, but he also knows that if he hesitates, bolder, less responsible voices will win. The decision is taken. The clock starts. In the following weeks, Nigeria becomes a vast, nervous counting room. In dusty market squares, men and women line up under the sun, clutching bundles of old notes to exchange. In small-town banks with cracked ceilings, exhausted clerks work until midnight, stamping, sorting, rejecting forgeries. On highways patrolled by soldiers, armored vehicles transport new currency, the lifeblood of the federal government's economy, under armed guard. And in the central bank, Clement hardly sleeps. He studies reports from every region. How much has been exchanged? Where are shortages appearing? Where is tension turning into anger? His staff see him at all hours, still in his suit, eyes red but focused. He is not just watching numbers. He is watching trust, because that is what a currency really is. Not paper, not ink, trust. One rumor, one shortage, one misstep, and that trust can evaporate. You don't need a bomb to destroy a state. Sometimes all it takes is people waking up and believing, for just one day, that their money is useless. The war grinds on. Pictures of starving children in Biafra shock the world. In his quieter moments, Clement feels the moral weight pressing down on him. He is fighting this war with spreadsheets and interest rates. But the consequences are painfully human. There is another pressure too. The generals, they visit the bank, sometimes politely, sometimes not. They want more funds for weapons, for logistics, for security operations. They do not speak the language of long-term stability. They speak the language of victory, now, at any cost. And in the background, his competitors move. Those smooth talkers who once charmed lecturers and socialites now charm colonels and commissioners. They present themselves as friends of progress, bridge builders, problem solvers. To them, the central bank is not an institution guarding a fragile economy. It is a vault waiting to be opened. When Clement resists, when he says, "We cannot finance that without consequences," he feels the room's temperature drop. In those moments, he is not just disagreeing with a policy, he is quietly creating enemies. The war finally ends in 1970 with the slogan, "No victor, no vanquished." But in the central bank, victory feels complicated. The country is still standing. The currency has survived. Foreign reserves have not completely collapsed. In technical terms, he has done his job. Yet something new and dangerous is already rising beneath the surface. Oil. Within a few years, oil revenue explodes. Crude flows from the Niger Delta like liquid power, and Nigeria suddenly finds itself drowning in money. Contracts, imports, grand projects. National development becomes the phrase on everyone's lips, and the excuse for almost everything. For a central banker born in a village where a bad harvest meant hunger, this sudden abundance is not comforting. It is frightening. He knows exactly what can happen to countries that discover easy money. He has read the case studies. He has seen the graphs. Nations that go from poor to rich too fast often lose discipline, drift into corruption, and end up worse than before. He starts to preach caution. In memoranda to the government, in carefully worded speeches, he warns about inflation, about the dangers of turning oil revenue into a permanent party. He urges savings, planning, investment in agriculture and human capital. He speaks of stabilization funds, long-term strategies, buffers for the day when oil prices fall. And this is where his rivalry with the other type of Nigerian leader turns into open conflict. For these men, oil is not a risk. It is a miracle. Where Clement sees volatility, they see opportunity. Where he sees the need for restraint, they see a chance to finally live like the elites in London and Paris. At banquets and receptions, they laugh softly at him. "Professor Isong," they say, "you worry too much. Nigeria is rich now." Behind their smiles, there is a challenge. Who will the generals listen to? The cautious economist with his gloomy warnings, or the confident politicians promising a golden future? The shocking truth is that often, in the short term, the reckless voices sound more attractive. And yet he holds his line. Under his watch, Nigeria introduces a new currency system. In 1973, the country abandons the old Nigerian pound and adopts the naira and kobo. On paper, it is a technical reform. Decimalization, modernization, aligning with global standards. In reality, it is another massive logistical and psychological operation, a second national currency drama in less than a decade. Again, there is a deadline. Again, there are trucks with cash, frantic counting, confusion in villages where people still think in pounds and shillings. Again, a single miscalculation could trigger panic. But this time, something else has changed. While he orchestrates this delicate transition, The oil money keeps pouring in. Government spending balloons. Imports flood the ports. In Lagos, brand new skyscrapers rise as slums expand in their shadows. The numbers in his reports begin to show a dangerous pattern. More money chasing too few goods, an economy stretching beyond its real capacity. He argues, explains, calculates. Some listen, many don't. One evening, after yet another tense meeting, he leaves the ministry building and spots one of his political rivals surrounded by admirers in the courtyard. The man is laughing, gesturing broadly, promising that Nigeria will soon rival Europe, that every citizen will feel the oil boom in their pocket. Their eyes meet for a second. To Clement, that glance says, "Your time is ending. My time is beginning." Behind the scenes, the military leadership grows impatient. The war is over. Their power now depends not on battlefield success, but on the ability to distribute the new wealth. Anyone who stands in the way of that distribution, no matter how principled, becomes an obstacle. In 1975, the axe falls from an unexpected direction. A group of officers stages a coup. General Yakubu Gowon, whom Clement has served for years, is overthrown while attending an OAU summit. The news spreads like fire through Lagos. Yet another sudden change at the top. For senior officials, every coup is a roulette spin. Will their names appear on a list of corrupt, dismissed, detained? For a few days, the central bank feels like a pressure cooker. Rumors. The new regime wants to purge the old guard. More rumors. The central banker is under suspicion for mismanaging reserves. Even more rumors. Some of his rivals are whispering into the ears of the incoming strongman, painting him as too close to go on, too resistant to reforms. He is investigated, scrutinized, his decisions examined line by line. In the end, the verdict is clear. No personal corruption, no looted millions hidden abroad, no secret London properties. His worst crime, in the eyes of some, is stubborn caution. But clean or not, his time at the top of the central bank is over. He steps down in 1975. The man who once sat at the center of Nigeria's financial system returns to private life with a simple truth ringing in his ears. In a country like this, integrity does not guarantee longevity. From the outside, it seems like a quiet exit. From the inside, it feels like exile. He returns to his home region, spends more time with family, takes on limited roles, advises quietly when consulted. For the first time in years, he's no longer under constant pressure to decide the fate of millions every week. And yet the clock in his head does not stop. Nigeria is changing again. The military, under pressure at home and abroad, begins to talk about a return to civilian rule. A new constitution is drafted. Political parties sprout like mushrooms in the rainy season. Bold acronyms, bright colors, big promises. One of them, the National Party of Nigeria, NPN, goes hunting for serious, respectable figures who can give it credibility. Not just showmen, but people whose names still command respect in serious circles. Inevitably, their search leads back to the quiet economist who once kept the country's money alive during its darkest hour. They come to him with an offer. Join us. Stand for office. Run for governor of Cross River State. For a man who has spent most of his life in the world of figures and footnotes, it is a shocking proposal. Politics is not a seminar. It is not a policy memo. It is a battlefield where reputations are shredded in days. He hesitates. He's nearly 60. He has already survived colonialism, independence, civil war, military coups. Does he really want to step into the chaotic arena of party politics now, where his competitors will not argue with data, but attack with slogans and gossip? Then he thinks of something else. Power. Not the raw, personal power of a dictator, but the power to actually decide how money is spent in his own state, in the neglected communities he comes from. At the central bank, he could guide, warn, advise. As a governor, he could build roads, schools, health centers, enforce discipline from the top. And there is another reason, quieter but real: pride. He has spent years watching men with half his understanding and none of his discipline shape the destiny of his region. The idea of leaving the field entirely to them begins to feel less like humility and more like surrender. He says yes. The countdown begins again. This time, the deadline is a date printed on posters and shouted through megaphones. 1979. In a matter of months, he must transform himself from a technocrat into a candidate, from a man who speaks to ministers in closed rooms into a man who can hold a crowd in a village square. He is not alone in this race. Within his own party, there is already a powerful competitor for the Cross River ticket, a younger, flashier politician who has spent years building local networks, handing out favors, mastering the grammar of Nigerian politics, patronage, promises, presence. If Clement's weapon is credibility, his rival's weapon is connection. At party meetings, the contrast is almost theatrical. Clement arrives quietly, often without a large entourage, carrying notes, ready to discuss policy. His opponent sweeps in like a minor king. Music, dancers, supporters in matching cloth, envelopes discreetly passing from hand to hand. Behind closed doors, party elders whisper, Isong is honest, yes, but can he win votes? The other man knows how to mobilize. We need someone who can face the opposition, not just balance a budget. The battle for the nomination becomes a war of two logics. On one side, the logic of competence. His years at the central bank, his international training, his reputation for not stealing. On the other, the logic of raw politics. Who can fill stadiums? Who can finance campaign buses? Who can take care of delegates? Again, the clock. The party convention date looms. Delegates are courted, pressured, bribed. Rumors explode. Clement has withdrawn. Clement has been pushed aside. Clement is too stubborn. Clement is too soft. He responds the only way he knows how, by showing up. He travels across the state, from coastal towns to inland villages, under rain and harsh sun. At community meetings, he tries something most technocrats fear. He explains complex issues in simple language. He reminds fishermen what happens when governments waste money. No roads, no clinics, no schools. He tells farmers about inflation, not as a theory, but as the reason fertilizer prices rise while their incomes stay flat. Unexpectedly, his honesty becomes an asset. People are tired. Tired of grand promises that vanish the day after elections. Tired of leaders who arrive with show and leave with silence. There is something refreshing about an aspiring governor who does not pretend money will appear by magic. But delegates are not always the same as the people. On the eve of the crucial party primary, his rival makes one last aggressive push. Nighttime meetings, hotel rooms buzzing with activity. Delegates disappearing for hours, returning with new loyalties. It feels less like democracy and more like an auction. Clement knows exactly what is happening. He also knows what he will not do. He will persuade, he will negotiate, he will argue, but he will not buy. It is not moral superiority, it is simply who he is. The man who refused to let the central bank become a printing press for reckless ambitions is not going to start stuffing envelopes now. The result is not guaranteed. In fact, as the delegates file into the hall on the morning of the vote, the mood is tense. Journalists in the back exchange bets. Some believe the flamboyant candidate has already secured victory. Others think the party elders will intervene at the last minute to push for the safer choice. Hours pass, speeches are made, ballots are cast. When the votes are finally counted, a murmur runs through the hall. Clement Isong has won the nomination. It is not a landslide. It is not a crushing humiliation for his rival, but it is decisive enough to send a message. In this moment, in this state, credibility still counts. The race is not over, of course. Now he must face candidates from other parties, each with their own machines, their own promises. Yet something crucial has shifted. For the first time, he is not in the background advising rulers. He is on the ballot to become one. Election day comes like a storm. From dawn, the streets fill with movement. Lines at polling stations, party agents arguing over procedures, soldiers trying to keep order. In some areas, rumors of violence circulate. In others, people treat it like a festival. Clement spends the day moving from one location to another, shaking hands, offering brief words, trying to look calm while his stomach churns. He has known many deadlines in his life. The day new currency must be ready. The hour a crucial policy must be announced. The moment. A coup might succeed or fail. But this is different. This time, the countdown ends not in a meeting room, but in the minds of ordinary people marking boxes on paper. When the results are finally compiled, after hours that feel like days, the verdict is clear. The boy from a small southeastern village, the scholar who walked through snow in America, the central banker who wrestled with war and oil and temptation, has done something he never planned as a young man. He has been elected civilian governor of Cross River State. As he takes the oath of office in 1979, hand on the Constitution, flashbulbs popping, a new clock starts in his head. 4 years. That is all he has. 4 short, noisy, dangerous years to prove that the way he ran the central bank, careful, disciplined, quietly stubborn, can actually work in the brutal arena of state politics. Behind the cheers, behind the handshakes, behind the anthem playing, there is a question hanging over him like a shadow. Can a man who spent his life protecting money now protect people in a system that rewards waste? The answer will not come in reports or forecasts. It will come in roads built or not built, in salaries paid or delayed, in the way his rivals, old and new, will try to sabotage him before the next election clock runs out. He thought the war years had shown him the worst a government could face. He was wrong. On his very first morning as governor, Clement Isong opens a file and realizes a new kind of crisis is waiting for him. Quiet, invisible, tense and deadly. A state on the edge of bankruptcy in the middle of a national oil boom. From the outside, Cross River looks blessed. Oil money is flowing into Nigeria. Lagos is buzzing with construction. Federal politicians talk about abundance and modernization. But when Clement sits down with his new team, permanent secretaries, civil servants who know the real numbers, the shock is brutal. Unpaid bills, half-finished projects abandoned in the bush, contracts awarded during military rule at inflated prices, salary arrears that threaten to explode into strikes. He closes the file slowly. 4 years. That is all the Constitution gives him. 4 years to take a confused, underfunded, badly managed state and turn it into something that actually works. 4 years before the people and his enemies decide whether he was a mistake. He gathers his cabinet in a bare, echoing conference room in Calabar. No chandeliers, no soft chairs, just a long table and walls stained by years of humidity. Outside, the air smells of sea salt and exhaust fumes. Inside, the atmosphere smells of expectation and fear. He speaks without notes. We will not spend money we do not have. We will not abandon salaries to build monuments. We will not mortgage the future of this state for today's headlines. Some of the commissioners nod, impressed. Others exchange wary glances. They have heard phrases like this before, usually from men who forget them the moment the first delegation arrives asking for assistance. But Clement is not playing to the gallery. He has seen what happens when a government loses control of its finances. Inflation, chaos, panic. He has lived through a civil war as a central banker. He is not going to let Cross River slide into a different kind of war, one fought in empty pockets and unpaid wages. He starts with an act many politicians would never dare, an audit. Teams of accountants descend on ministries. Ghost workers, names on the payroll that do not belong to real people, are hunted down and removed. Contracts are reviewed. Some are renegotiated, others canceled outright. The reaction is immediate and vicious. Phones begin to ring in his office. Your Excellency, that contractor is a party supporter. Sir, this man financed our campaign. You cannot just cancel his project. Governor, with respect, this is how things are done. This is where his old rival reappears, not as a shadow, but as a constant presence. The flamboyant politician he defeated at the party primary did not disappear after his loss. He reinvented himself. He appears at state functions with his trademark smile and crowd of followers, loudly pledging loyalty to the governor while quietly gathering every disgruntled businessman, every disappointed appointee, every ambition wounded by Clement's discipline. In private, he poisons the well. Isong is a good man, he tells people, but he does not understand politics. He thinks this state is a bank. He does not know how to take care of his own. The phrase take care is a dagger wrapped in velvet. In Nigeria's Second Republic, to take care means to share contracts, to allow a little leak here, a little inflation there, in the name of party unity. It is exactly the mentality Clement fought against in Lagos. Now he must fight it in his own backyard. He refuses to trade discipline for applause. Instead, he makes a choice that defines his governorship. If he cannot do everything, he will do the essential things and do them properly. He orders that salaries be treated as sacred. Civil servants may grumble about his austerity, but they are paid. Teachers in remote villages, nurses in understaffed clinics, junior workers who never meet the governor but feel his decisions in their pay packets. They become unexpected allies. Then he turns to infrastructure, not as a showpiece, but as a spine. Roads that had become narrow tracks in the rainforest are graded and resurfaced. Not all, not enough, but key routes that link farmers to markets, coastal communities to the interior. Water projects are revived. Modest health centers appear in places that had never seen a government doctor. The projects are not flashy enough for glossy magazines. There are no golden domes, no vanity stadiums. But a trader who can now reach the town market in 2 hours instead of 6 does not care whether the ribbon cutting made the evening news. Still, every naira he spends in one direction is a naira he refuses to spend in another, and his enemies keep count. Within the first year, delegations begin to arrive from Lagos, smiling, well-dressed, carrying invisible ledgers of favors owed and favors expected. Your Excellency, they say, there is an important federal personality who wants a contract in your state. Governor, you must support this project. It will bring prestige. Dr. Isong, politics is expensive. Remember who supported you. He remembers. But he also remembers something else. Oil prices do not rise forever. In 1981, the global oil market shudders. Prices dip. Suddenly, the river of cash Nigeria thought would never dry up begins to shrink. Federal allocations to states fall. Projects planned in the glow of permanent abundance must now be re-examined under harsher light. For Cross River already struggling, the impact is brutal. One morning, Clement sits with his finance team over a grim spreadsheet. Columns of figures march across the page like soldiers. But this time, they are withdrawing, not advancing. Expected revenue down. Federal transfers delayed. Obligations, salaries, maintenance, loan repayments, unchanged. A commissioner suggests the easy path. Your Excellency, we can simply borrow more. Banks will lend to us. The people will see projects and forget the debts. He has seen that film before. It always ends the same way. Insolvency, desperation, begging from foreign creditors who dictate policy from across the ocean. He shakes his head. We will not build a palace on borrowed sand. That the decision sets a new clock. If he chooses austerity, cutting back, prioritizing, saying no more often than yes, he risks becoming the most unpopular governor in the state's short democratic history. If he chooses to borrow recklessly, he may win applause today and leave the next generation buried in obligations. He chooses austerity, budgets are slashed, ambitious projects are postponed. He insists that what little money there is must go first to paying salaries, maintaining key infrastructure, keeping the basic machinery of the state running. Contractors complain, party faithful complain. Even some ordinary citizens, tired of hearing about prudence, begin to mutter that their governor's too stingy. His rival seizes the moment. At funerals, at weddings, at crowded street corners, the man works the air like a seasoned performer. Look at our neighboring states, he says. They are building great things, highways, estates, new secretariats. But here, our governor thinks like a cashier. He counts coins while others build the future. It is a clever attack because it is almost true. Clement does count coins. He tracks expenditure down to small details. He questions cost estimates line by line. He sends files back with red ink notes that drive some commissioners to fury. You don't trust us, one of them complains. I trust the numbers, he replies. As the second year bleeds into the third, the tension rises. Unions threaten strikes when any delay in pay occurs, even for a week. Students protest when promised facilities are slower to arrive than hoped. Community leaders demand more visible dividends of democracy. The radio crackles with callers angrily comparing Cross River to richer, flashier states. At night in the governor's lodge, Clement sits at a desk with a lamp pool of light and a wall calendar in front of him. On it, a date is circled in red, the next election. Every day he approves a payment, signs a policy, or rejects a contract. He feels that date drawing closer. 460 days, that is what 4 years means. The clock that once measured currency exchanges and policy deadlines now measures something more personal, his own political survival. Then comes the twist. The main threat to his governorship does not come from the opposition, at least not at first. It comes from inside his own party. As the 1983 elections approach, the National Party of Nigeria begins to panic nationally. The economy is struggling. The glow of 1979 has faded. Party bosses fear losing seats, governorships, their grip on power. They start scanning each state, asking a cold question. Which incumbents are an asset and which are a liability? In Cross River, some powerful figures answer quickly. Clement Isong is a problem. They cannot accuse him of corruption. There are no mansions in London, no secret bank accounts in Switzerland. So they attack something else, his style. He is too rigid, they say in smoky hotel rooms. He does not know how to carry the party along. The people see no action, though we will lose if he remains our candidate. His old rival, always ready to step into any vacuum, senses his chance. By now, another ambitious figure has emerged on the horizon. Donald Edibet, sharp, connected, with strong links to national power brokers. To party insiders hungry for a new face who will energize the base, Edibet is a tempting alternative. Whispers turn into meetings. Meetings turn into motions. A frightening possibility becomes a plan. Deny the sitting governor the party ticket. For Clement, it is more than an insult. It is a violation of the unwritten code of Nigerian politics. Incumbents are usually favored. They control appointments, contracts, the machinery of state. To challenge one from within the same party is to risk open war. The pressure on him is intense. Some urge him to fight dirty. Use the power of your office, they say. Flood the primaries with your supporters. Release more contracts, open the taps. This is how it is done. But he knows what they are really asking. Divert public resources into political survival. Turn the state budget into one more campaign fund. He refuses. We cannot bankrupt this state so that I can keep a title, he tells a close aide. If the party does not want me, let them say it in daylight. Daylight comes in the form of party primaries. Delegates gather again, just as they did years earlier when he first sought the nomination. But the atmosphere is different now. Back then, he was the fresh choice, the man whose central bank record could impress cautious elders. Now he is the old regime some want to discard. On the floor of the convention, slogans fly, envelopes circulate. The same techniques he once refused to use are now deployed against him. Etibet's supporters promise a new dawn, a more generous government, a leader who understands politics, not just economics. Clement does what he has always done. He speaks plainly. He reminds the delegates where the state began in 1979. Broke, disorganized, and shows them what has been done with limited resources. He talks about roads repaired, salaries kept current, a state that has not sunk into the debt trap swallowing others. But in that hall, arithmetic is stronger than memory. When the votes are counted, the result hits like a quiet explosion. The sitting governor, Clement Isong, has lost his own party's nomination. Donald Etibet is the new NPN candidate for Cross River State. For a moment, the noise of the hall fades into a dull hum inside his head. He has been overthrown without a gunshot, removed not by soldiers, as in 1975, but by delegates with ballot papers. The effect is the same. He is now a lame duck. He still has months left in office. The Constitution does not evaporate just because the party has moved on. But every day from that moment, he governs under a new shadow. Commissioners watch Etibet's body language more than the governor's speeches. Contractors hedge their bets. Civil servants whisper about the incoming administration. The temptation to lash out is enormous. He could sabotage. He could sign reckless last-minute contracts. He could leave a financial time bomb for his successor. He does none of that. Instead, he becomes even more careful in his final months, determined that when history compares his tenure with those that follow, at least the numbers will speak clearly. Outside, the political circus continues. Etibet campaigns hard and wins the general election. Clement, now firmly in the background, watches a younger man take the oath in the same seat he occupied 4 years earlier. The crowd cheers just as loudly as it did for him. That is one of the painful lessons of politics. No matter how intense your time in office feels, the world moves on quickly. He returns home, not yet the elder statesman he will become, but already the man who knows what it is to rise, to serve, and to be discarded. Then history adds one more twist, sharper than anything party politics could manage. On the night of 31st December 1983, while Nigerians prepare to step into a new year under their fragile civilian government, the familiar sound of martial music cuts through radio broadcasts. A stern voice announces that the military has taken over to save the nation from corruption and chaos. Politicians are dismissed. Governors, old and new, are removed. Some are arrested, others interrogated, a few jailed. Clement listens to the broadcast, not from a bank office, not from a governor's lodge, but from his own home. He has seen this movie before, too. The uniforms, the justifications, the promises of discipline and order. He understands something bitterly ironic, that the prize so many men fought each other for in 1983, the governor's chair, has been swept away like a piece on a chessboard, knocked over by an impatient hand. Once again, his country resets the clock with a coup. For Clement, it is a strange, almost surreal vindication. He was punished for refusing to loosen the state's financial discipline, for refusing to turn Cross River into a playground of reckless spending. Now, a new military regime arrives, accusing politicians of exactly that kind of excess. But there is no triumph in his reaction, only fatigue, and a question that begins to form in his mind, a question that will define the last phase of his life. If prudence in power is punished, if caution is mocked, if integrity shortens your political career instead of protecting it, what then does a man like Clement Isong do after the noise of office fades, and the country he tried to serve keeps throwing itself into the same storm? He had spent his whole career trying to stop disasters before they happened. Now, for the first time, Clement Isong realizes the next disaster he fears is one he cannot prevent, the slow erasing of everything he stood for. The coup has swept away governors, ministers, party officials. Newspapers carry grainy black and white photos of men in uniforms, pointing at charts and talking about recovering looted funds. Names of flamboyant politicians fill scandal stories, but in the long lists of those to be probed, one name is conspicuously quiet. His, no mansions abroad, no luxury estates suddenly discovered, no secret oil accounts. In a country hungry for villains, a man without obvious scandal is almost invisible. Soon after the coup, he clears his desk in Calabar. The governor's seal, the files, the letterheads with his name printed in bold type, they all go back to the state. The convoy shrinks, then disappears. The sirens switch off. By the time he returns to his own compound, the sound of drums from political rallies has already faded, replaced by the evening chorus of crickets and generators. Power leaves faster than sound. In the small sitting room where he and his wife now spend most evenings, the television glows with images of tribunals. The new rulers parade accused politicians before cameras. Viewers see stacks of cash on tables, property seized, tales of contracts inflated until they burst. He watches stone-faced. Some of the faces on screen are men who once lectured him about being too tight-fisted, men who mocked his insistence on keeping Cross River's budget under control. Now they stand in ill-fitting clothes, sweating under harsh lights, their voices cracking as they plead for leniency. There is a bitter satisfaction available here, a chance to say, "I told you so." He never says it, Instead, the question that pressed on him the night of the coup grows louder, almost unbearable. If integrity shortens your career, if caution invites mockery, what is the point of being careful? He is 63 years old. Not an old man by village standards, but no longer young by political ones. His heart has carried him through currency crises, civil war, and the suffocating heat of campaign rallies. It will not carry him forever. That becomes his new clock. Not 4 years in office, not an election date circled on a calendar, but something more unpredictable. The number of days his body has left to work, to think, to argue for the kind of Nigeria he believes in before his voice fades completely. Retirement for him is never going to mean silence. At first, though, the silence is forced. The new military government watches all former governors closely. Some are detained for months, others for years. Investigations swirl. Invitations to answer a few questions are delivered not with polite letters, but with armed escorts. When his turn comes, he goes quietly. He sits in a plain office opposite officers who expect to find something. Some hidden account, some unapproved contract, a signature on a suspicious file. They question, probe, cross-check. He answers calmly, almost clinically, as if explaining a banking transaction to a junior staff member. The numbers line up, the accusations do not. When he walks out of that room, free to go home, he understands something new about his country. For years, he thought the conflict in Nigeria was between politicians and soldiers, civilians and uniforms. Now he sees a deeper rivalry. Two visions of what public office is for. One sees power as harvest. The other sees it as responsibility. He has lost the throne, but he has not lost that argument. Not yet. Word spreads quietly among civil servants and in markets, in beer parlors and university corridors. The former governor, they didn't find anything on him. In a land exhausted by scandal, the fact itself feels almost shocking. It does not make him rich. It does not give him back his office. But it gives him something he values more. A different kind of authority. The authority of a man who can walk through his hometown without hiding. In Eket, where the roads are narrower and the air smells of red earth and palm oil, people greet him now simply as doctor or our governor, without the motorcade, without the distance. He attends church in the same pews he sat in as a younger man. After the service, under the shade of a mango tree, people gather to tell him their troubles. School fees, hospital bills, land disputes. He listens with the same intensity he brought to budget discussions. But as the months turn into years, the country around him moves on to a new drama. The military ruler who overthrew the civilian government promises a transition. Committees are set up, reports written, timelines announced. Newspapers fill with phrases like political engineering and new breed politicians. Nigeria enters one of its strangest periods. Not war, not peace, not fully civilian, not fully military. For a man who values clear rules, it is torture. He watches as new parties are formed from above and dissolved just as quickly. He sees elections announced, postponed, then announced again. The country becomes a laboratory where democracy is constantly prepared, but never fully served. In the midst of this, a personal earthquake hits him. In 1987, the federal government creates a new state, Akwa Ibom. What was once part of Cross River is sliced away by decree. New borders are drawn on maps by hands in Lagos and Abuja. Towns that once sent delegations to Calabar now turn their eyes toward Uyo. And Eket, his home, the soil that shaped his earliest memories, is suddenly no longer in Cross River State. It is in this newborn political entity called Akwa Ibom. Overnight, the map of his life splits. He remains historically the former governor of Cross River State. But the village elders who pour libation in his honor, the school children who walk past his family compound, the church choirs who pray for his health, they now belong to Akwa Ibom. He cannot change the lines drawn on paper, but he can decide what they mean. When invited to events in Uyo, he sits on the front row at ceremonies where the young state tries to define itself. Launches, anniversaries, public lectures. In rooms heavy with new ambitions and old grievances, his presence is a bridge between past and present, between the old Cross River he governed and the Akwa Ibom where his bones will someday rest. But even bridges need to pick a side when storms come. As oil politics intensify, debates about revenue sharing, derivation, who gets what from the wells off their shores, Akwa Ibom begins to feel cheated. Communities see the rigs on the horizon, the flames of gas flares at night, and ask why their villages still lack clean water and good schools. At town meetings, younger activists speak with anger burning under their words. They took our oil, they say. They built their cities with it. What did we get? When Clement stands up to speak at such gatherings, he holds in his memory the other side of the story. The balance sheets, the national negotiations, the fragile compromises that prevented the country from tearing itself apart. He knows how dangerous the language of they and we can become. He chooses his words carefully. He speaks about justice, but also about stability, about the right of oil-producing communities to benefit from their resources, but also the need to avoid tearing the nation into pieces. His sentences are slow, deliberate, thick with the weight of experience. Some nod. Others mutter that the old man is too moderate. He understands their impatience. He has tasted his own version of it, in war rooms and cabinet meetings, and he understands something else. The rivalry that once played out between him and a flamboyant opponent in a party hall has now expanded, multiplied, become a national pattern. On one side, the politics of spectacle and quick rewards. On the other, the politics of patience and long-term planning. By the early 1990s, that rivalry takes a new, almost surreal shape. The man who defeated him in the 1983 primaries, Donald Etibet, resurfaces on the national stage. Under yet another military regime, Etibet becomes a powerful figure linked to the oil sector. The same oil whose fluctuations once tortured Clement's budgets. The same oil whose revenue now fuels fresh disputes over fairness. Newspapers print Etibet's name alongside the biggest industry in the land. Meanwhile, Clement's name appears in quieter places. Footnotes in economic histories, programs for academic conferences, lists of those invited to give keynote addresses on public finance or federalism. Two men, two careers, two very different afterlives. One swims close to the river of oil money, navigating its currents. The other stands on the bank, warning about floods no one wants to think about. It would be easy here to fall into resentment, to ask why those who took shortcuts climb back so quickly, while those who stayed within the lines are left holding lectures instead of levers of power. He refuses that bitterness. Instead, when the invitation comes in 1994 to serve at the National Constitutional Conference, he sees in it something he thought he had lost forever, a chance, however slim, to help redesign the rules of the game itself. The conference is a strange parliament. Traditional rulers in flowing robes sit beside trade unionists in simple shirts. Activists who have tasted prison share microphones with retired generals who once signed detention orders. The hall is filled with the buzz of fans overhead and the murmur of dozens of conversations in different accents, different languages, different wounds. Clement arrives with his old briefcase, filled not with political slogans but with papers, notes on fiscal federalism, proposals for revenue allocation, charts showing how different formulas would affect states like Akwa Ibom. Here, the clock is visible. The conference has a mandate and a deadline. Months, not years. Within that time, they must write recommendations that could shape Nigeria's constitution or watch their work die in a drawer. Inside the committees, the old rivalry takes on new faces. Some delegates demand sweeping autonomy for their regions. Others want a strong center, fearful that too much devolution will rip the country apart. Oil-producing areas argue passionately for higher shares of revenue. Representatives from less endowed states warn of national collapse. If the balance tilts too far, in one heated session on resource control, a younger delegate slams his palm on the table. Our people live beside the wells, he says. We breathe the gas flares. You sit in distant capitals and spend the money. This cannot continue. All eyes turn to Clement when he raises his hand. He knows every argument on both sides. He could speak as the son of an oil-producing state and demand more. He could speak as the former head of the central bank and warn about national finances. He could speak as a former governor and talk about how even oil-rich states can go broke with bad management. He chooses to be all three at once. He speaks about fairness, but also about the responsibilities that come with increased revenue. He argues that oil money must not simply replace one form of recklessness with another, that stronger states must also mean more disciplined states. He reminds them, without naming himself, what happens when a governor refuses to take care of friends in order to pay salaries. Some delegates are moved. Others roll their eyes. This is not a seminar, one whispers to a colleague. This is politics. He hears them. He continues anyway. Late at night, when the sessions end and the hall empties, he sometimes lingers, alone among the plastic chairs and discarded paper cups. He runs his fingers along the edge of the table, feeling the roughness where years of use have worn the polish away, and wonders if any of their words will survive the next change of government. Because outside the conference center, another clock is ticking, a darker one. Nigeria is restless. The memory of a recently annulled election hangs over every conversation. Trust in grand promises is thin. Some fear the entire exercise is a performance, a safety valve to release pressure without changing the underlying system. For Clement, the stakes are painfully personal. He does not expect to live forever. His hair is whiter now, his steps slower, his doctors more insistent that he rest. When he looks around the conference hall, he sees younger politicians who will still be active 20 or 30 years from now. He sees generals with decades of influence behind them. He, by contrast, counts his remaining chances in single digits. This may be his last serious turn at the table. The thought sharpens his voice whenever he speaks. gives his arguments an urgency that surprises even those who have known him for years. It is not anger, it is time pressing against his ribs. When the conference ends, its recommendations are handed over in a thick-bound volume. Hundreds of pages of compromises, idealism, caution, and hope. Delegates pose for photographs, shake hands, exchange addresses. Clement holds his copy with the tenderness of a craftsman who knows the house he helped design may never be fully built. Back in Akwa Ibom, life resumes its usual rhythm. He serves on boards, advises quietly when called upon, writes papers few outside policy circles read. Younger officials visit his home, some out of genuine respect, others because a photo with the elder statesman looks good in campaign brochures. He can tell the difference. He receives them all with the same calm courtesy. Every so often, a rumor spreads that he will return to active politics. Each time it evaporates. He knows better than to chase offices that now belong to another generation. His fight has shifted from ballots and budgets to something more subtle and, in its own way, just as fierce. The fight over memory. History, he knows, is not written only in books. It is written in what people choose to remember and what they allow to fade. In some versions of Nigerian political history, his years as central bank governor and as state governor are a paragraph. In others, they do not appear at all. Leaders who decorated stadiums with their names and faces seem bigger in the popular imagination than the man who insisted on paying teachers on time. He sees it in the way students answer questions at public lectures. They recognize the names of loud, scandal-ridden politicians, but frown when his is mentioned. Sometimes, when introduced, he watches the brief flicker of surprise in young eyes. Oh, he's still alive? That more than any lost election cuts him, but history is not finished yet. In 1999, the impossible happens again. The generals step back. After years of false starts and broken promises, Nigeria finally holds elections that lead to a real civilian government. On May 29, 1999, the country watches as a new president takes the oath of office in a stadium filled with color and heat. The date is declared Democracy Day. In his living room, Clement watches the ceremony on television. The camera pans across a sea of faces. Politicians, foreign dignitaries, ordinary Nigerians waving flags. The applause echoes through the speakers. Commentators speak excitedly about a new dawn, a second chance, the return of the people's will. The scene is both new and eerily familiar. He has stood on a similar platform before, hand raised, oath repeating. He has believed in new dawns that were later drowned in coups and crises. He knows the distance between ceremony and reality, yet as he sits there, something in him softens. He does not applaud, but he does something rare for a man who has seen so much disappointment. He allows himself to hope again, cautiously, and like someone testing the strength of ice before taking a step. In Akwa Ibom, new governors take office, new slogans cover billboards, new projects are announced with fanfare. At some ceremonies, he is invited to sit in the front row, a living link to the last time Nigerians tried civilian rule seriously. Younger leaders introduce him as one of the founding fathers of our state, or a pioneer of modern public finance. He smiles at the exaggerations, but he does not correct them. If this is how his legacy must be smuggled back into public memory, wrapped in ceremonial phrases and protocol, so be it. By now, however, another clock is ticking faster. His health, always something he managed quietly, becomes more insistent. Doctors talk in terms of tests and treatments. He hears them in terms of remaining chapters. He continues to receive visitors, to read, to follow the news with the same restless attention as ever. But each day's fatigue is heavier than the last. There is one more twist, the kind a novelist might hesitate to invent for fear of being accused of symbolism. On May 29, 2000, exactly 1 year after Nigeria's newest civilian era begins with a grand inauguration, exactly on the first anniversary of Democracy Day, Clement Isong's heart finally stops. While the nation marks the survival of its fragile return to civilian rule with parades and speeches, the man who helped build its monetary system and once governed one of its key states dies quietly, far from the spotlight. News of his death ripples across the country. Radio stations announce it in brief bulletins. Newspapers print obituaries, some short, some detailed. Colleagues from his central bank days write tributes about his discipline, his belief in sound money, his refusal to bend figures for political convenience. Former civil servants from Cross River send messages recalling salaries paid in full, even in hard times. In villages and town squares in Akwa Ibom, elders pour libation and speak his name with the weight reserved for ancestors. In Calabar, some remember him as the governor who did not build monuments to himself. In Abuja and Lagos, a few recall the central banker who kept his country afloat in its most dangerous years. In Eket, in the quiet of family compounds, his death is not a headline but a wound. At his burial, the crowd is a tapestry of different eras. There are old men who once sat with him at policy tables leaning on walking sticks. There are middle-aged civil servants who started their careers under his watch. There are young politicians who know him more as legend than as memory, and schoolchildren who have only just learned his name from hurried lessons prepared when news of his death broke. Under the canopy, speeches unfold, some formal, some personal. One speaker, a younger official who grew up during his governorship, tells a story that does not appear in official biographies. As a boy, his father, then a low-ranking civil servant, would come home each month with his salary, a small stack of notes wrapped carefully in newspaper. The family would sit together as he divided the money, food, school fees, church, a little kept aside for emergencies. During those 4 years, the man says, voice catching, my father's pay was never missing. That is why I went to school. That is why I'm standing here today. It is a small story in a country of millions, but it carries the essence of Clement's life in office more accurately than any list of titles. Later, as the crowd thins and the red earth settles over his grave, the question he asked himself after the coup, the one that haunted his final decades, hangs in the air, unanswered but changed. What is the point of being careful in a careless system? Maybe the answer is not in elections won or lost, in statues built or toppled, but in quieter places. The unbroken pay packet of a teacher, the clinic that stays open in a small town, the road that remains passable in the rainy season because someone insisted the contractor do it properly. His rivalries, in the end, did not end with him. The conflict between spectacle and substance, between harvest and responsibility, still rages in Nigeria's politics long after his burial. New names take the place of the old ones. New faces appear on posters and television screens. Some chase power as prize, others see it as duty. The contest between them continues like an endless election without a final tally. But in economic textbooks, in footnotes on monetary history, in specialist discussions about the early years of Nigeria's central bank, one name keeps appearing when the talk turns to discipline and prudence. In Akwa Ibom and Cross River, when debates flare about how to use oil revenue, when arguments about budgets and savings and debt return, as they always do, someone eventually mentions an old governor who once refused to take care of his friends at the expense of his state. Clement Isong never built a stadium named after himself. He left no towering monument in concrete and glass. The legacy he chose stubbornly, sometimes painfully, was written in numbers, in balances kept, in crises avoided. Numbers do not march, do not sing, do not campaign. They cannot ask to be remembered. But somewhere in the slow, patient arithmetic of history, in the long sum of what Nigeria has gained and lost, a line remains. On it is the memory of a man who treated public money as if it belonged to the unborn, not the connected. A man whose greatest victories were the disasters no one saw because they never happened. A man who, even after he left office, and even after his country forgot him for a time, refused to believe that integrity was pointless. He lived as if, one day, the ledger would be open and the quiet work would count.